Hi, I'm Jan Sesnek. I'm an artist and I'm currently a game designer in residence at MICA in Baltimore. For a few years now, I've been working on a bunch of projects about prayer requests. Prayer requests are videos that people upload to YouTube where they're asking for prayers for some kind of specific problem. It's usually something either personal or somebody they know, and they're asking for your prayers. So I find these really fascinating, and I think they make for some really uncomfortable viewing, for me anyway, and they've become, maybe because of that, a recurring theme in my work. I'm here with Peter Manseau, who is the curator of American religious history at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., and I wanted to talk to him about prayer requests and what they maybe represent, and just get a little bit more knowledge and insight into what they are, since I'm making work about them. What do you see as the kind of religious history of prayer requests?
Well, the idea that you can ask God or the saints or other religious entities to intercede on your behalf is very old. The idea is called intercessory prayer, and it is basically the idea that you can make a deity aware of a situation, which would be surprising that an all-knowing God would not know about, and yet there is something to the act of speaking aloud or otherwise making needs known that makes the prayer more efficacious. It leads to an end, the act of speaking it. And so this has a very long history, and the interesting thing to me about this latest iteration of prayer request through video distributed through the internet, it is really just making much more public than it has ever been before, something that used to happen privately or within communities. So you can read accounts in 19th century American churches and earlier of people writing their prayer requests on little cards that they'd pass to the front of the church, and then the preacher would read them aloud, and then the community would be able to pray for them. So that happens in a limited space, in a particular community. As technology offers new ways to communicate with ever more people, that circle expands. So it happens again with radio. It happens through television, and televangelists will say, write in with your prayer requests. And it's mediated in those instances of technology through whoever is controlling the technology. So if there's a radio preacher asking for your prayer request, then he or she needs to read them for others to hear them and act upon them. And the same is the case with televangelists. So what the YouTube prayer requests do is that it really democratizes that everyone has this ability now to make their prayer requests known instantly. And the other interesting thing about that is that even with that ability, you can still find a number of mediating services online that will do this for you. So you can write into a Catholic prayer website and express through a form, these are my prayer requests. And you can write into, it is mostly a Christian phenomenon, but there are Orthodox Jewish sites where you can do the same thing, and Torah experts will pray with whatever request you send into them. So even with this ability to just make your own prayer requests known, there's still some value that some see in this active mediation of presenting your prayer request to a religious authority, which then transmits it to a larger audience.
Now, one of the things I find super fascinating about it is how it's mediated through the platform they're uploading onto. So like, one of the things I really like to look for is prayer requests that nobody's watching or nobody's listening to, right?
Yeah.
But that's actually really hard to do on YouTube, because YouTube is actually showing us the popular ones, right? And they're showing us the ones from trusted uploaders or people who have some sort of cachet on their algorithms. And so it's like, while people feel like they're speaking to everybody and that they have access to the entire world, in practice, there's things like in YouTube, you can't search for videos by lowest view. You can only search by highest view.
Yeah.
So, and then you can just endlessly sift through thousands. And so when you looking for personal prayer requests can be quite challenging, because these mediation services that you're talking about totally have a lockdown on them. So if you search for a prayer request, the first 30 will be from big megachurches, or the section of a sermon from a church, from a pastor or something. doing it. And so it's interesting how the mediation service has ended up becoming, like you say, the person who's controlling the message is now the platform that people are uploading onto.
Yeah. It's interesting the way the technology also gives us new ways to think about how this is supposed to work. So I think about it now in terms of upvoting on something like Reddit. And so is that what we're supposed to assume? Is that how prayer works? Like, are the more people that are praying for a specific cause, are they making it more likely to be seen by whatever entity you want it to be seen? So not just to be seen by others, but is it somehow, is the assumption that it's more efficacious to have more and more and more people actively engaging with the prayer request? And what does that say about whatever authority you are appealing to?
Particularly within the American ones that are uploaded, there is a very specific set of language that's used, a specific set of words that's used in many of them, that does really imply that kind of like collective voices beaming their prayers for towards a God, and then that God therefore listening because some sort of critical mass has been achieved. And a lot of it is also done, like a big phrase that keeps coming back is prayer warriors. Mm-hmm. So the idea that like they're in battle together, and because everybody is collectively praying for David whose car broke down on the side of the highway, or Lauren who has cancer or whatever, that because of that, they're all coming together. And I do wonder, like, well, am I right that feels particularly American? And if so, why would that be?
Yeah, so it's you hear this term prayer warriors, and if they are applying their prayers to specific cases, like they need to rescue a cat from a tree, there's a tendency to think of them as like prayer superheroes in a sense, like they're swooping in to solve a situation. But that's only really part of what this idea of prayer warriors is all about. The idea of a prayer warrior comes from a much larger understanding that those who consider themselves thus they think that they are engaged in a spiritual warfare, which is to say that it's not just a warfare against the bad things that are happening to people, but that the bad things are happening to people because evil is alive in the world. And so prayer warriors are involved in their religious understanding in this kind of apocalyptic end-time struggle between good and evil. And so praying for the defeat of someone's cancer is the same thing as praying against evil in the world in a micro way rather than in the macro way. And a lot of that has to do with why this particularly takes hold in the American context, is that is a big part of the view of American evangelicalism, that it understands that they have long been that religious conservatives in the American context have long been at war with the secular culture, which they can see to some degree as a demonic force that is trying to prevent their own religious practice and the flourishing of their religious ideas.
I find that they're like asking me for something that I just can't provide. You know, it's like they're asking me for prayers because they see them as having some sort of value, and I don't really see them as having that value. And I guess I'm not sure if that's the only thing that's making me uncomfortable, or if there's something else under there that just kind of like, you know, maybe it's because I don't see these people every day, and then it's like there's something being revealed to me that's always there that I'm just unaware of, I guess.
Yeah. It's interesting just the contrast between an artist's view of these things and the view of those that make them, because in both senses, or from both directions, there's the question of who is using who, right? Because you feel conflicted because you may be using them, you may be casting them in a light that they may not want, but at the same time, if they put their prayer requests out there, they want them to be amplified. And if you are going to amplify them to your godless audience of artists, then that is something that they would probably want. And they would think that there's a good reason why you came along and you found their video. Out of all the millions of videos, why did you find their prayer request? You know, it's not the algorithm. It is God who brought you there. And now you are being used to their ends. So as far as what the ultimate goal it is to make these things known as far and wide through as many channels as is possible. So I think that is probably a trade-off that both sides are willing to make.
Is that something that might exist more in America because of the kind of like just generally fractured and free, whatever that means, religious culture here, just because there are so many different belief systems here, and that kind of us versus them thing becomes more obvious?
Well, a metaphor that you often hear about religion in America, and I'm not entirely convinced by it, but this is something you hear a lot, is that it's a free market in religion in America, and those things become popular that offer the most immediate benefit. And so that's why you have ideas like the so-called prosperity gospel, which suggests that if you ask God to be rich, God will make you rich. You just have to ask him in a convincing way and show that you are willing to do what God wants, and you will become rich. That offers an immediate benefit, an immediate something to aspire to. And I think that is directly connected to these prayer requests, because often you find that people are making prayer requests not just for health or for the treatment of illness, but for things they want. I mean, it's there's this idea of naming it and claiming it.
Yeah, I saw one the other day that was somebody saying, I currently have 2 cars. I got a blue Jeep, and I really want to get another Jeep, but I need to sell my first car in order to get it. So I'm just looking for prayers to let me sell my first car so that I can buy this other car. And I thought, boy, that's really pretty rich there, buddy.
Yeah, yeah.
Why should I care about your cars?
Yeah, but when you break down a lot of these things, they can come down to that type of concern, and it's that. Who is to say that one type of intercessory prayer is better than another, right? But someone once told me or referred to something that they had read where the line was that any type of intercessory prayer is vicious. And vicious, this is the adjective they use because it is denying something to someone else, like necessarily. If prayer is a zero-sum game, if I get my new Jeep, what do you get? Presumably not that new Jeep.
Well, because God's paid attention to that one instead.
Yeah. It's like it assumes that God has limited bandwidth, right? And so God can only take care of so many of these requests. Yeah. And he's going to notice the ones that are upvoted the most. So you better get on that. Yeah. But if you're just by yourself asking for the thing you need, you might get lucky, but you might not.
I'm quite curious about what's binding these people together. Like, do you think that they all just assume that they would go to the same church if they're in the same neighborhood, or is it like, could it be that they're actually different sects and they just happen to be like? I'm quite curious about what that community is.
Yeah, I assume the latter, that they are from all different types of denominations, but they are all engaged in this collaborative performance, which is praying on the internet, and everything on the internet is performative, right? And so the people who put this prayer request out, they're performing something, and the people who comment are also performing something. And I would suggest that their performance says nothing about whether or not they're actually praying. It's like there is a performance of saying you're praying on the internet, yeah. And I don't know if the act of doing that, if they regard that as a prayer in itself. Like, is saying you're praying? I don't know. I don't know what it means to them. I don't know exactly what is involved. Is it just having a good thought and sharing it? I don't know what it means to the individuals, but I do know that commenting that way, much like putting up the video in the first place, is a performance of prayer.
Thank you very much. That was super fascinating. So yeah, thanks very much for giving more information on all that.
Happy to talk about it.
Okay, thanks, Peter.
Sure thing.